In Lima, on May 24th, 1964, Peru thought it had scored the goal that would save the match against Argentina. Then the referee erased it. Seconds later, the stands erupted, tear gas filled the stadium, and thousands ran for the exits. But at the bottom of the tunnels, the doors were shut. What happened next became one of the deadliest disasters in football history. I'm Arturo, and this is Latin Lore, from Latin America's history to mysteries and true crime, to local legends whispering Latin intrigue. Every tale is verified in archives before it reaches your headphones. Hit subscribe, fresh revelations drop every week, ready for your next campfire debate. A football stadium should echo with drums, curses, and hope. On May 24th, 1964, in Lima, it echoed with a whistle, gas, and thousands fleeing closed doors. Remember that image. Not the scoreboard, not the referee, the doors. Because a disputed goal lit the fuse, but systemic neglect and social tensions turned a match into a tragedy. The disaster unfolded inside Peru's Estadio Nacional during an Olympic qualifying match between Peru and Argentina. By nightfall, the game was no longer the story. The story was the crush in the tunnels, one of the deadliest stadium disasters football has ever known, the hospitals filling with families, and a death toll that rose through the dark until it settled, officially, at 328. So the real question is not only why the crowd became enraged, the deeper question is why, once fear took hold, so many people had nowhere left to breathe. The tournament mattered. South America was fighting for places at the Tokyo Olympics, back when Olympic football still demanded amateur players. Peru's side had been drawn from local amateur clubs, boys carrying a nation's hope on modest boots. Argentina arrived as one of the continent's giants and already looked likely to finish first. Peru still had a reason to believe. A win over Argentina would not just have been glorious. It could have reopened the table and kept the dream alive. So Lima came. The official count says 47,197 spectators entered the national stadium, though many who were there remember it feeling closer to 50,000. Tickets had swollen in price, and a cheap seat could bite like a day's wages. Still, the stands are filled. That tells you what football meant. People were not only buying 90 minutes of sport, they were buying a place inside the nation's heartbeat, where class, pride, and longing all learned to shout together. Outside the stadium, Peru was already on edge. The early 1960s were full of strikes, marches, land conflicts, and bitter distrust between the public and the police. The government spoke of reform, but the street had heard promises before, so the crowd that entered Estadio Nacional did not arrive empty. It carried the country's unfinished arguments in its chest. And against Argentina, that mattered even more, because this was not just any rival. This was a test of status before one of the old powers of the continent. The first half stayed scoreless. Then, in the second, Argentina struck and went 1-0 ahead. The stadium tightened. Every pass after that felt heavier. Every missed chance stung harder. Peru kept pressing, the crowd kept believing, and the last minutes gathered over the concrete like a storm refusing to break. For a while it seemed the afternoon would end the ordinary painful way, with curses and what-ifs. Then Peru believed it had found salvation. With only minutes left, Victor Kilo Lobaton got to the ball and sent the stadium into eruption. For one heartbeat, it was 1-1. For one heartbeat, Lima was saved. Then Uruguayan referee Eduardo Passos disallowed the goal. He judged that Lobaton had lifted his boot too high and played dangerously. To this day, the call is still argued over. Some say it was correct. Others say Peru was robbed. But in that moment, the whistle did not sound technical. It sounded like an insult, theft, and public humiliation. Two men broke from the terraces. One was the figure remembered by many as Bamba, already known for charging officials. Police stopped him before he could reach the referee. The other was Edalberto Cuenca, and what happened to him changed the crowd. He was beaten, kicked, struck with batons, and accounts remember police dogs set upon him as the stands watched. Up to that point, the fury had been aimed at the decision. After that, it found a second target, the police and everything they represented beyond the touchline. Now the match was dying in pieces. Bottles, coins, shoes, and torn seat cushions rained toward the field. More spectators surged down. Barriers were shaken, then ripped. Some police officers trying to restore order in the stands were attacked. This is the point where lazy retellings call the crowd savage and move on. But that explanation is too comfortable. The crowd was angry, yes. The catastrophe came because anger met disastrous control, sealed exits, and force wielded without wisdom. Some people, sensing the day was lost, tried to leave before chaos worsened. They faced the stadium's hidden danger, steep passageways ending in heavy steel shutters. Some say authorities closed them to stop rioters, others say attendants were absent. Either way, many met steel, where there should have been open exits, fueling outrage and concern about systemic neglect. Then came the decision that turned disorder into tragedy. Police fired tear gas into the packed stadium. That was not crowd control, it was panic. Gas burns eyes, lungs, and erases thought. It told bodies to flee, causing thousands to run toward exits that many already knew were blocked or dead ends, fueling outrage and helplessness. Walk that route slowly, you leave your seat, you drop down the steps, someone shoves because someone shoved them, your eyes are watering, your chest is tightening. The noise behind you grows harder, not softer. You enter the tunnel and keep moving because the crowd behind you is still moving. Then the truth appears at the bottom, a steel shutter closed. Not an open gate, not the street, a wall. In that instant, the stadium ceases to be a sports ground and becomes a machine. This is how a crush kills. Not like cinema, with clear villains and dramatic trampling, it kills by pressure. People in the back keep pushing because they cannot see the blockage. People in the middle are compressed before they understand what is happening. People at the front are pressed into metal and concrete until breathing becomes work, then pain, then impossibility. Your arms may be pinned, your feet may leave the ground, your whole world shrinks to one primitive task: find one more breath. Inside those tunnels, the air grew hotter and thinner. Some fainted and did not fall because the crowd held them upright. Others died where they stood, with no room even to collapse. Survivors remembered bodies wedged so tightly together that motion vanished. Time changed shape. Minutes stretched like rope. No one trapped in that knot of flesh and fear could send a warning back through the mass. The people behind kept pushing towards salvation that did not exist. Eventually, the pressure exceeded the stadium's hardware. Some shutters buckled. When they gave way, the crowd spilled into the streets in a terrible mix of the living and the dead. Imagine that sight once, and it never leaves you. Bodies pouring through, some gasping, some limp, some still trying to drag loved ones who no longer answered. Relief did not arrive cleanly. It arrived smeared with grief. The doors had finally opened, but far too late. After they had already done the work history would remember them for. Outside, Lima did not greet the survivors with calm. It erupted. Fires were set, shops and private homes were attacked. Vehicles vanished in the chaos. Even a nearby prison lost control long enough for prisoners to escape. For hours, police fought running battles in the streets while ambulances and private cars carried the injured away. At the hospitals, families shouted names, studied lists, and stared at faces as if recognition itself had become a punishment. Women and children were among the dead. Ordinary people had come that afternoon, and ordinary people were buried by it. The death toll climbed in cruel stages through the night and into the next morning. The official final figure became 328 dead, with hundreds more injured. Even that number has never sat quietly in public memory. Many believe the real toll was higher. Part of that doubt came from grief. Part came from darker suspicions that not every victim died in the tunnels. From almost the beginning, there were reports of police gunfire and accusations that some bodies were concealed or shifted beyond honest scrutiny. We have to walk carefully here. Those claims were never settled in a way that satisfied history, but neither can they be dismissed like fever dreams. Judge Benjamin Castaneda, who investigated the disaster, suggested that bodies were being hidden from him and that police gunfire had not been honestly accounted for, yet his report never became a national reckoning. It was discounted. He was fined for delays and procedural failures, and the deeper allegations were left hanging, as if power had decided enough truth had already escaped. What accountability arrived was thin. The police commander who ordered the tear gas was sentenced to 30 months in prison. That was something, but it was not a reckoning equal to 328 dead. The referee, whose whistle ignited the crisis, continued his career, and football, that strange machine that absorbs almost anything, kept moving. The match was abandoned, but the result stood. Argentina was credited with the 1-0 win, as if the day could still be filed under sport and not national trauma. The tournament moved on with cold efficiency. Argentina finished first. Peru still had one more path, a playoff for the second South American place at the Tokyo Olympics, but Brazil beat them there. In the record books, those are neat facts. Argentina and Brazil qualified. Tokyo awaited. But beside that tidy arithmetic sits the real memory, a city burying its dead while the competition advanced on schedule. History can be brutally orderly that way. The table gets updated. Families are left counting shoes, hospital bracelets, and unanswered names. Peru declared a week of national mourning after the disaster. Constitutional guarantees were suspended for 30 days as the state tried to contain unrest and the aftershocks of its own failure. Later, the stadium's capacity was reduced, an architectural confession that too many bodies had been packed into a place not prepared to protect them. But reducing seats is easier than confronting culture. Concrete can be measured. Contempt is harder. What happened in Lima was never only a matter of crowd size. It was also a matter of how authorities saw the crowd. So no, this cannot be explained honestly as nothing more than football violence. That phrase is tidy, and tidy phrases are how institutions sometimes wash their hands. Yes, there was rage in the stands. Yes, some spectators turned violent. But the scale of death came from a collision of bad decisions. Blocked exits, tear gas fired into a dense crowd, and a policing mentality that treated the public as something to suppress before it treated them as people to protect. The whistle lit the match. The structure and the response built the funeral. The deeper roots matter too. Peru in 1964 was a place where public anger already knew the shape of protest. Workers, students, migrants, and the urban poor had long experience with authorities who did not feel neutral. Many in the stands lived daily with class insult, insecure work, and rules that seemed to arrive from somewhere else and press down on them like weather. Football offered a rare stage of recognition. When Peru seemed to equalize against the continental power, and that joy was erased, the wound cut deeper than sport. That is also why Argentina mattered so much. This was not simply the team in the other shirt. Argentina carried prestige, pedigree, and the old weight of football nobility in South America. Peru was chasing more than points. It was chasing standing. In terraces full of people hungry for a national joy they could touch, the disallowed goal felt like humiliation in public. Not everyone would have explained it the same way, of course, but the emotion was shared. Peru had risen, and someone had placed a hand on its head and pushed it back down. Over the years, people have tried to explain the day with grand conspiracies and stories so sensational that they almost erase the human logic of what actually happened. But the truth does not need fantasy to be horrifying. It is terrible enough that a disputed goal, an abusive police response, and closed steel shutters were all it took. We do not honor the dead by floating away from the ground. We honor them by seeing clearly how ordinary negligence, arrogance, and force can build a catastrophe faster than anyone wants to believe. The Estadio Nacional did not disappear after 1964. It remained important. It was renovated, music returned, football returned. New crowds learned again how to sing in that bowl of concrete, but for years, there was no memorial there worthy of the people who never made it home from that match. That absence says something too. Nations often know how to repaint walls before they know how to mourn, honestly. Yet the place remembers anyway. Stadiums remember in silence. Tunnels remember in echo. Doors remember in the bodies they once refused. So when you return to the beginning, return to the whistle, yes, but do not stop there. Follow the sound down the steps. Follow it into the tunnel. Follow it to the shutter at the bottom, the one that turned fear into suffocation and public anger into permanent grief. That is where the truth of May 24th, 1964 finally stands. Not in a single referee's decision, and not in some convenient myth about savage fans, but in a chain of human choices that left hundreds with nowhere to breathe and nowhere to go. A football match is supposed to end with cheers, curses, maybe tears, and then the long walk home. In Lima, that walk became the story because too many never completed it. The city still carries that afternoon like a scar beneath a shirt. And that is the question to leave beside the fire tonight. When you think of this disaster, what haunts you most? The stolen goal, the tear gas, or the shut doors at the end of the tunnel? Because the answer you choose says a great deal about where you think tragedy really begins. Muchas gracias. Thanks for trekking the hidden trails of Latin America with me. If tonight's story unsettled you, subscribe and ring the bell, because Latin America's most intriguing stories are far from over.